My parents skipped my son's funeral, then demanded his $850K trust fund for my sister's wedding. My son died on a Thursday. My parents were at a cake tasting. I found out later that the tasting ran 40 minutes over. My mother texted a laughing emoji about a lemon buttercream that tasted like a candle. That was 4:52 p.m. Lucas took his last breath at 4:47 p.m., 5 minutes earlier, in a hospital bed with a stuffed elephant named Milton tucked under his arm. Nobody in my family knew yet. Nobody had called them. There was nothing to interrupt. 9 months later, I sat down at their kitchen table in the same black dress I wore to bury him and watched my father lay out a spreadsheet like he was pitching investors. "We've been waiting," he said. "Let's keep this calm." "I am calm," I told him. That scared him more than yelling would have. My mother stopped pacing behind his chair and just looked at me, like calm wasn't a setting she recognized on my face anymore. She was right not to recognize it. I'd spent 9 months learning how to hold my face still while everything underneath it burned. A thick binder sat against my hip, resting on the chair beside me. She noticed it before she noticed anything else in the room. "What's that?" she asked. "Just some records," I said and set it down on the table, next to the wedding budget spreadsheet my father had printed on cardstock like it was a legal filing. My sister Emma was already seated across from me in her wedding gown, an actual sample gown, tulle pooling around her chair legs, crying into a tissue without smudging her mascara. I remember thinking, with a kind of detached clarity, that I hadn't seen her cry once in the 18 months my son was dying. Not once. Not at the diagnosis, not at the last scan, not at the funeral, but she could cry on command for a dress rehearsal of a conversation about money. I want to tell you how we got here. It's going to take a while because it took a while to happen. 8 years, really, though the worst of it compressed into 18 months and then detonated in the 9 months after. I'm not going to rush it because I didn't get to rush through living it, and I think if you're going to understand why I did what I did next, you need to understand what came before. My name is Rachel Doyle. I'm 36. I work as a compliance analyst for a regional healthcare network, which is a boring way of saying I spend my days reading documentation, cross-referencing dates, and building paper trails that hold up when someone tries to lie about what happened. It is not a skill I asked for. It is a skill my family taught me I would need. Lucas was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was 6 years old. He was a small kid with a big vocabulary, the kind of 6-year-old who asked whether stuffed animals got lonely when their kids went to school, and then worried about it out loud for the rest of the car ride. Milton, the elephant, went everywhere with him. Infusion chairs, MRI machines, the ambulance ride during his second relapse. Lucas decided early on that Milton was protecting the vein, referring to whichever arm had the IV that week. He was very serious about this job Milton had. My husband David and I built our entire lives around 18 months of hospitals after that. Round-the-clock treatment cycles. A port placement that put Lucas in the OR for the first time. Long nights in a pull-out chair that turned my spine into something that still aches on rainy days. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for us. Plenty of families go through this and come out the other side with their kid intact, thank God, and we hoped every day we'd be one of them. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the baseline. This was our life. This was the water we swam in for a year and a half, and my family visited my son a combined total of 97 minutes. I know the number because I wrote it down. I wrote a lot of things down. It's what I do. My mother, Carol, and my father, Gerald, came to the hospital twice. The first visit was 17 minutes. They'd stopped by on their way to a furniture outlet sale and mentioned the traffic on the highway 3 separate times. The second visit was 80 minutes, and I only remember the number because my mother spent 40 of those minutes on a call with her interior decorator about paint swatches for the guest bathroom, standing in the hallway outside Lucas's room while he asked me quietly if Grandma was mad at him for being sick. My sister Emma visited 0 times, not once, in 18 months. She lived 40 minutes away. Emma was engaged to a man named Marcus, and from the moment the ring went on her finger, the wedding became the only event scheduled anywhere in my family's collective calendar. Venue tours, dress fittings, a wine and cheese tasting she posted to Instagram, sparkling rosé, a charcuterie board shaped like a heart. On the same afternoon, Lucas had his port placed under general anesthesia 3 miles away. I texted her that morning, "He's scared. Can you call him after, just for a minute?" She didn't respond until that evening, and when she did, it was to the family group chat about cake flavors, lemon or almond. Need votes by Friday? 12 minutes after my text. Not to me, to everyone. About cake. My mother, when I brought this up once, just once, carefully, trying to explain that Lucas needed people, told me Emma had obligations. That was the word. Obligations. As if a 6-year-old dying in stages was an inconvenience competing for calendar space with a florist consultation, and the florist consultation had won on merit. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chin, visited 14 times. She wasn't family. She was a 71-year-old retired school teacher who lived alone since her husband passed, and she showed up at our door with soup, with crossword puzzles for me. And once, this is the detail that still gets me, with a shoebox of plastic dinosaurs, because Lucas had decided somewhere in month 4 of treatment that dinosaurs were braver than elephants, and Mrs. Chin had heard about it secondhand from me, and gone out and bought a shoebox of dinosaurs at a dollar store. She showed up more in 1 month than my parents did in 18. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters to me even now, even after everything. My parents are not monsters in the cartoon common sense. They didn't hate Lucas. I think, in their own limited emotional bandwidth, they loved him the way you love a photograph on a shelf, fondly, abstractly, without any sense that it required maintenance. What they could not do, what they have never been able to do in my entire life, is prioritize anything inconvenient over anything that photographed well. Emma's wedding photographed well. My son's decline did not. Lucas relapsed for the second time 14 months in. The oncologist, Dr. Patricia Alvarez, 19 years in pediatric hematology oncology, a woman who spoke to Lucas like he was a colleague and not a patient, who let him approve his own treatment plan by initialing next to the doctor's signature on a clipboard, told David and me, in a small consultation room with a box of tissues positioned exactly at the center of the table like it had been placed there for this specific purpose, that the second relapse was harder to treat than the first. She didn't use the word terminal. She used the word aggressive and the word limited and the phrase quality of life, and I understood what she meant without her having to say the rest. We told my parents. My mother's response, verbatim, texted 40 minutes later, "That's awful. Also, do you think Emma should do a fall or spring wedding? Trying to lock the venue." I did not respond to that text. I have never responded to that text. I still have it. Lucas died on a Thursday in October at 4:47 p.m., with David on one side of the bed and me on the other, and Milton wedged between his arm and his ribs exactly where he liked him. He'd been mostly unconscious for 2 days by then, on a morphine drip, breathing in that slow, uneven way that the hospice nurse, a soft-spoken man named Tobias, who'd clearly done this 100 times and never once let it look routine, had gently warned us was the pattern that usually comes near the end. I held his hand. It was smaller than it should have been at 8 years old. I told him it was okay to go. I don't remember if I believed it when I said it. My family found out from me, by phone, 40 minutes after. Here is exactly what I received back over the following few hours, and I am quoting these texts word for word because I saved every one of them, because some part of me, even in that first haze of grief, already understood I would need them someday. From my mother at 6:31 p.m. "Oh no, that's so sad. Emma has venue visits this weekend, but we'll figure something out for the service, don't worry." From my father at 6:44 p.m. "Sorry to hear it. Keep the service small, be efficient, no need to make a big production." From Emma at 7:02 p.m. "Did you see my message about Fluffy, her cat, getting groomed? Also, Marcus and I leave for Napa tomorrow morning. Can someone watch her?" I did not respond to any of them that night. David and I sat on our bedroom floor with our backs against the bed and didn't speak for a long time. I planned the funeral alone. David helped with logistics. He's an accountant, methodical, and grief made him quiet and useful rather than incapacitated, which I will be grateful for the rest of my life. But the emotional weight of it, the choosing of the casket, the writing of the program, the deciding whether Milton should go in the ground with Lucas or stay with us. He stayed with us. I couldn't do it, and I don't think Lucas would have wanted his protector buried where he couldn't do the job anymore. All of that carried by myself. 18 hours before the service, my mother called. Emma's original venue got double booked for the date they wanted, she said without any preamble, as if we'd been mid-conversation about this topic for days. "There's a replacement venue tour Saturday morning, but it's the only slot they have open for the next month." I didn't understand at first why she was telling me this. "Saturday morning is the memorial," I said. "I know, that's the conflict. We wanted to check with you first." "Check with me about what?" "About whether you'd mind if we did the venue tour instead. Lucas is gone. There's nothing we can change for him now. Emma is still here, and this venue is the only realistic option left for her date." I want you to sit with that sentence the way I had to sit with it, standing in my kitchen with a printed funeral program in my hand, 12 hours from burying my child. "There's nothing we can change for him now." As if love were a service you provided contingent on the recipient's continued usefulness. As if grief had a return on investment calculation and my dead son had come back negative. They chose the venue tour. 11 people came to my son's memorial. Me, David, David's parents, Mrs. Chin, Dr. Alvarez, who took time out of her Saturday to be there, which undid me more than almost anything else that week. A few of my coworkers, Tobias, the hospice nurse, who didn't have to come and came anyway. My family sent a grocery store bouquet, the plastic-wrapped kind, carnations and baby's breath, the arrangement you grab in a checkout aisle, with a card that read, in my mother's handwriting, "Love, Mom, Dad, and Emma." That same afternoon, while I was still in the black dress, folding the extra memorial programs into a box because I couldn't stand to throw them away, Emma posted a photo to Instagram. My parents stood beside her at the new venue, some restored barn with string lights, the kind of place that costs more per hour than most people's monthly rent, all three of them holding champagne flutes, raised mid-toast. The caption read, "A successful new beginning for our family, can't wait for what's next." I took a screenshot. I don't know exactly why I did it in that moment, dressed for a funeral, but something in me, the part of me that would spend the next 9 months building a binder, already knew I might need it. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from an insurance administrator I'd never spoken to, a woman named Diane, who explained, gently and a little confused as to why I hadn't already known this, that my grandmother, my father's mother, who'd passed away when Lucas was 2, had set up an irrevocable trust for him years earlier, funded through a life insurance policy. I was listed as sole trustee. Diane walked me through the paperwork. The policy had paid out $850,000. David and I told no one, not because we planned to hide it forever, but because we were still learning how to exist in a world without our son in it, and the last thing either of us wanted was to introduce a number number into our grief. We put it in a separate account. We didn't touch it. It felt, in some strange way, like it was still Lucas's, like spending it would mean admitting he was really gone in a way we weren't ready to admit yet. 7 months passed. I went back to work. I started therapy, which I'd recommend to anyone, but which also gave me the vocabulary to finally name some things about my family that I'd spent 36 years not naming. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Renata Osei, a licensed clinical psychologist who specializes in grief and family systems, 12 years in practice, once said something to me that I've thought about almost daily since. Grief doesn't create new dynamics. It just removes the ability to keep pretending the old ones weren't there. Then my mother opened mail that wasn't hers. I still don't fully understand how it happened. Some paperwork from the trust administrator had been sent, by clerical error, to my parents' address instead of mine. An old address mix-up from years back that nobody had corrected. My mother opened it. She called me within the hour. "We need to talk about the trust," she said. "What trust?" "Don't play dumb with me, Rachel. $850,000 is sitting in an account while your sister's wedding is falling apart around her." I remember the exact physical sensation of that sentence landing. A cold drop through my chest, followed by a strange, disbelieving urge to laugh. "That money is connected to my son," I said. "It's not a slush fund. And your sister is still here," she said. "She's alive. She has a future. You could actually do something with that money that matters, instead of just letting it sit there gathering dust." I hung up. She called back 4 times that night. I didn't answer. The next morning, I had a voicemail from my father, calmer in tone, but somehow worse in content. Walking through, I'm not exaggerating, a numbered list of reasons the trust made more sense allocated toward Emma's replacement venue, which apparently had fallen through after their tour. I never learned the details, and by that point, I didn't care to ask. Reason 3 was, Lucas would want his family to be happy. I want to be very clear about something. My son was 8 years old when he died. He did not leave behind opinions about estate distribution. He left behind a stuffed elephant, a signed clipboard from his oncologist that he was inexplicably proud of, and a family who apparently believed his death had generated a windfall they were entitled to collect on. They wanted $680,000, specifically. My father had done the math, a full venue buyout, catering upgrade, a live band instead of a DJ, and what he called a contingency cushion. He'd built a spreadsheet. I saw it weeks later, on the kitchen table, formatted with tabs and subtotals. A line item literally labeled trust contribution, $680,000, sitting between florals and photography videography. Emma called me crying that same week about lost deposits from the original venue. $6,000, she said, though I never verified the number and have no reason to trust it. She talked for 11 minutes. She never once said my son's name. Then, 3 days later, she posted a photo of herself in her wedding dress. The same sample gown. I recognized the beading. Mascara streaked in a way that looked suspiciously well lit for spontaneous tears. Captioned, "Trying to stay positive through an unexpected family tragedy that's put a huge financial burden on us, right when we need support the most." Wedding planning during grief is so much harder than people realize. She did not name Lucas. She did not name me. She let the caption do the work of implying something vague and sympathetic, and it worked exactly as intended. Within 2 days, someone in her friend group had started a GoFundMe for the Doyle wedding, which had raised almost $4,000 by the time I found out about it, from people donating in the genuine belief they were supporting a family recovering from tragedy. They just had the wrong family member in mind. I did not scream. I did not cry, though I wanted to, in the specific, useless way you want to scream into a pillow until your throat gives out. Instead, I opened my laptop and I started printing. This is the part of the story where I tell you what I do for a living actually mattered, because for the first time since Lucas died, I had something to do with my hands and my brain that wasn't just survival. I am a compliance analyst. My job, in plain terms, is building airtight documentation trails, timestamps, cross-references, chains of custody for information, the kind of paperwork that holds up when someone with power tries to claim something didn't happen the way the record says it happened. I do this for a healthcare network. I have never, until that week, done it for my own family. I printed the texts, everyone in chronological order, time-stamped, the cake tasting emoji, the keep it small, be efficient message from my father, Emma's cat grooming text sent 72 minutes after her nephew's death. I printed the hospital visitor logs. I'd requested them from the hospital's records department months earlier, during a strange, numb week when I think I already suspected I might need proof of something, though I couldn't have told you what at the time. 97 minutes, confirmed by sign-in sheets with actual times next to my parents' names. 0 entries under Emma's. I printed bank statements, not the trust account, but my parents' shared checking account, portions of which David and I had legal visibility into from a joint property matter years earlier and had simply never closed out. I found charges for the venue deposit dated the same week as Lucas's second relapse diagnosis. I found a $4,000 dress fitting charge dated the week of his funeral. I printed the Instagram posts. The champagne toast, captioned, "A successful new beginning," taken hours after my son's memorial. The mascara-streaked unexpected family tragedy post, and beneath it, the screenshots of the GoFundMe comments. Strangers offering condolences for a loss they didn't know had already happened to someone else, someone whose name never appeared anywhere in the fundraiser's description. I built a binder with 4 tabs, one for my mother, one for my father, grandmother, one for Emma. The last tab said, trust. David found me at midnight, still arranging pages in order at the kitchen table, 3 days before my parents wanted their answer about the $680,000. You're really going tomorrow? He asked. Not tomorrow. The meeting was still days off by then, but he'd already guessed where this was heading, that I intended to walk into that house prepared for something more than a conversation. Yes, I said. You don't owe them an explanation. I know, I said. But they keep telling everyone this is about money. Emma keeps telling strangers on the internet this is about money. I want them to have to sit there and understand, on the record, that it was never about money at all. I closed the binder. My hands weren't shaking anymore by that point. They had been on and off for weeks. A fine, constant tremor that would come on whenever I thought too long about the venue toast photo, or the keep it small text, or the number 97. But that night, closing the binder, they were steady. It's time they find out what it's actually about, I said. Before I tell you what happened at that kitchen table, I need to back up and tell you about the 2 weeks in between, because I didn't walk in with just a binder. I walked in with a plan, and the plan involved people whose names I want you to know, because without them, this story ends very differently. Probably with me shouting into a void and my family calling me unstable at Thanksgiving for the rest of my natural life. The first person I called was an estate attorney named Marcus Whitfield, no relation to Emma's fiancé, an unfortunate coincidence of names that made our first phone call briefly confusing. Whitfield had 18 years of practice specializing in trust litigation and fiduciary disputes, and when I explained the situation, sole trustee of a minor's irrevocable trust, family members demanding a $680,000 distribution for an unrelated purpose, with documented pressure and, I suspected, an attempt to establish some kind of paper trail suggesting I'd agreed. He was quiet for a moment and then said something I've repeated to myself many times since. You are under zero legal obligation to distribute a single dollar of that trust for a purpose unrelated to its terms. The only question is whether they escalate, and if they do, whether you're prepared. He walked me through the trust document itself. My grandmother had, mercifully, drafted it with narrow language, restricting distributions to Lucas's medical, educational, or welfare-related needs, administered at trustee discretion, with remainder provisions in the event of the beneficiary's death that named me and David, not my parents, not Emma. In plain terms, they had never had a legal claim to that money. Not a partial one, not a technical one. Zero. Then why do they think they have one? I asked him. Because, he said, in my experience, people who believe they're entitled to something rarely bother checking whether they actually are before they ask for it. The second call was to a forensic accountant named Priya Nandakumar, CPA, 14 years specializing in financial fraud investigation and family trust disputes, whom Whitfield recommended specifically because, his words, if there's a paper trail showing intent to misappropriate a minor's trust, you want someone who can present it in a way a court, or frankly a room full of relatives, cannot argue with. Priya spent 2 days going through the documents I'd already gathered, plus records she pulled herself with my authorization as trustee, full banking history on the trust account itself, confirming 0 unauthorized access attempts, and a detailed financial reconstruction of my parents' spending patterns in the 18 months of Lucas's illness and the year following his death, cross-referenced against the wedding's actual costs. What she found, and later put into a formal written summary, was this. My parents had already spent, at minimum, $31,000 of their own money on wedding-related expenses in the year before I received the trust call from Diane. $14,000 of that came out of a home equity line of credit they'd opened 4 months after Lucas's diagnosis, meaning they had gone into debt planning a wedding while their grandson was in active cancer treatment and were now attempting to solve that self-inflicted financial problem using money legally earmarked for that same grandson after his death. This isn't really a financial hardship story, Priya told me, in the flat, careful tone of someone who'd clearly delivered hard truths to families before. This is a pattern of prioritization that predates the trust entirely. The trust just gave them a target. The third person I brought in, and this one I debated longest, because it felt like the most aggressive move, the one that made the whole thing feel less like a family conversation and more like a case being built, was Detective Renee Kowalski, 22 years with the County Sheriff's Office. The last 9 specifically assigned to financial crimes and elder and family fraud cases. I didn't call her to press charges. Not at first. I called her because the GoFundMe had, by that point, raised almost $6,000 from people who believed Emma's family was managing a genuine, undisclosed tragedy, when in reality the tragedy, my son, was being deliberately obscured from the fundraiser's language, and the money was being solicited under what I suspected, and Kowalski confirmed, could constitute charitable solicitation fraud, depending on how explicitly the page misrepresented the nature of the family tragedy. You don't have to decide right now whether you want this prosecuted, Kowalski told me, in a voice that managed to be both procedural and kind at once. But I'd strongly recommend you document the fundraiser in its current state, screenshots, timestamps, the works, before anyone has a chance to edit the language after the fact. If this does end up needing to go further, you'll want a clean exhibit. Exhibit, that word again. I was starting to understand that my life had, without my consent, developed exhibits. I did as she suggested. I screenshotted everything the night before the meeting. The fundraiser page, the donor comments, Emma's captioned photo, all of it, with a timestamp overlay app David found for me so nothing could later be claimed to be doctored or backdated. The morning of the meeting, meeting, I laid it all out one more time at my own kitchen table. David across from me, going through the binder tab by tab like a rehearsal, though I don't think either of us called it that out loud. Tab 1, my mother. The venue tour phone call, transcribed from memory but corroborated by a follow-up text she'd sent confirming the same details. The "Emma is still here" line from the trust phone call. The GoFundMe comments, where she'd personally written under a pseudonym I recognized instantly from her old Yahoo email handle, "This family has been through so much. Please help if you can." Tab 2, my father. The spreadsheet, I'd photographed it weeks earlier during a visit, ostensibly checking on something else, in a moment I'm not entirely proud of but don't regret. The "Keep the service small" text, time-stamped the night my son died. The home equity line of credit documentation Priya had pulled, dated 4 months into Lucas's treatment. Tab 3, Emma. The 0 hospital visits, cross-referenced against the visitor logs. The cat grooming text, the champagne toast photo, the unexpected family tragedy post, and beneath it, printed in full, the fundraiser page with every donor comment, every dollar amount, every well-meaning stranger's misplaced sympathy laid out in black and white. Tab 4, trust. The grandmother's original trust document, narrow language and all. Whitfield's written legal opinion confirming 0 distribution obligation. Priya's financial summary. And on top, Lucas's 8th birthday photo, him grinning with a mouthful of missing teeth, Milton clutched under one arm, a hospital ID bracelet still visible on his wrist, because we'd taken the photo during a rare good week between treatment cycles. "You don't have to use all of it," David said, watching me close the binder for what felt like the 100th time. "You could just tell them no." "I know," I said, "but I think I've spent my whole life telling this family things quietly and having it not matter. I don't think quiet works on people who've never once stopped to listen." They were waiting when I arrived. My mother pacing, my father seated with the spreadsheet already printed and centered on the table like an altarpiece. Emma in the sample wedding gown, which I later learned she'd worn specifically because, in her words to a friend I heard about secondhand, she wanted me to see what I'd actually be taking away if I said no, as if my refusal to fund a party was equivalent to the thing that had actually been taken from me 9 months earlier. I set the binder down beside the spreadsheet. The sound of it landing, a solid, deliberate thud, stopped every half-formed sentence in the room. My mother's eyes went straight to the tabs. She read each label, and I watched her face do something complicated when she reached the last one. "What is that?" she asked, nodding at trust. I opened to the first page. Lucas's 8th birthday photo looked back at all of us. Missing teeth, Milton, the hospital bracelet. "Before we talk about my son's money," I said, "we're going to talk about my son." My father tried to redirect almost immediately. Something about how everyone knows what happened, Rachel. We don't need to relitigate it. But I kept turning pages, and I kept talking, and for the first time in my adult life, I did not let anyone in that room interrupt me. I read them the 97 minutes. I read them the 14 visits from a neighbor who owed us nothing. I laid the "Keep the service small" text on the table, face up, next to the venue tour spreadsheet, and let the 2 documents sit there together, dated 3 hours apart, so no one had to take my word for anything. My mother's face went through stages. I watched it happen in real time, the way Whitfield had warned me it might. First indignation, chin lifted, ready to argue. Then, somewhere around the visitor log page, something flickering and uncertain, like she was doing math she didn't want to finish. By the time I reached the fundraiser screenshots, her own pseudonymous comment, "This family has been through so much," printed and highlighted, she'd stopped pacing entirely and was standing very still, one hand flat on the table, not looking at anyone. Emma cried harder, but it was a different kind of crying than the tissue dabbing performance from earlier. This one came with her makeup finally giving way, mascara tracking down in real unglamorous lines, and I understood, watching it happen, that some part of her recognized exactly what she was looking at. "You don't understand what it's been like," she said. "Everyone's been asking about the wedding, and I couldn't tell them." "You couldn't tell them what?" I asked. "That your nephew died? You managed to imply it in a caption to raise money. You just made sure never to say his name doing it." My father, to his credit, or perhaps just his pragmatism, was the first to stop arguing. He'd been a numbers man his whole life, and I think somewhere around Priya's financial summary, the home equity line, dated 4 months into treatment, laid out with dates he couldn't dispute because they were his own bank's dates. He understood that this wasn't a conversation he could out-negotiate. "What do you want us to do?" he said. Not a question, really. Flat. Defeated in the specific way of a man realizing the spreadsheet had lost. "I want the GoFundMe taken down within 24 hours, I said. "Every donor refunded, with an accurate explanation of what actually happened, that the fundraiser was solicited under a misleading description of a family tragedy that occurred 9 months prior to a different family member. I have a detective's card in this binder if that doesn't happen by tomorrow evening, and I will use it." I let that sentence sit in the room for a moment. "I want a written acknowledgement. Not to me, I don't need it, I know what happened. From both of you to Emma, that the trust will not be distributed for the wedding in any amount under any spreadsheet line item. I want it understood permanently that this money is not a family resource. It is what's left of my son, held in trust exactly the way his great-grandmother intended, for exactly the purposes she named." My mother, quietly, from the table. "And if we don't agree to any of that, then I walk out with this binder," I said. "And I let Detective Kowalski and my attorney decide what happens with a fraudulent fundraiser and a documented pattern of financial pressure against a trustee. I've already given them everything in tab 4. I was hoping I wouldn't need to send it. That's still true. It's up to you which version of this week we're living in by tomorrow. The GoFundMe came down the next morning. I know because Kowalski called to confirm it herself. She'd been monitoring the page at my request, and she read me the takedown notice Emma had posted, a stripped-down factual paragraph that, for the first time in this entire ordeal, actually contained my son's name. This fundraiser was created based on an incomplete and misleading description of a family loss. My nephew Lucas passed away 9 months ago. The family tragedy referenced was not disclosed accurately, and I take full responsibility for that. All donations are being refunded in full. It wasn't an apology to me. It didn't need to be. It was finally the truth in public with his name in it. The refunds went out within the week. Priya helped me confirm the account activity since I'd asked her to keep an eye on it as part of closing out the file professionally, the way she would for any client. Every donor got their money back within 9 days. The written acknowledgement took longer and came in a form stiffer and more legalistic than I expected. I think my father, still a numbers man to his bones, felt safer putting things in a format that resembled a contract. It named the trust, named its purpose, named the fact that no distribution would be sought for Emma's wedding. It was not warm. It did not contain an apology for the 97 minutes, or the grocery store flowers, or the champagne toast. I didn't get everything. I got the thing I actually needed, which was the truth, documented, in writing, so it could never again be quietly rewritten into a story where I was the unreasonable one. Emma's wedding happened 5 months later. I wasn't invited, which I understood was probably for the best, for everyone. David heard secondhand that it was smaller than originally planned. No live band, catering scaled back, the contingency cushion apparently absorbed by whatever they'd actually managed to save rather than borrow. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that. I mostly just felt tired in the specific bone-deep way that comes after a fight you didn't want but couldn't avoid. My relationship with my parents exists now in a diminished, careful form. Occasional calls, shorter than they used to be, with an unspoken agreement neither of us has stated out loud that certain topics stay permanently off the table. My mother sent a card on what would have been Lucas's 9th birthday. It said his name. It's a small thing. It is also more than she managed to do for most of the 18 months he was alive to receive it, and I've had to learn to let that small thing be enough, because waiting for more would mean waiting forever, and I don't have forever left in me to spend on people who've already shown me what they'll choose when it counts. My relationship with Emma is functionally over. Not through some dramatic final scene, just a slow, mutual stopping, the way rivers dry up in a drought rather than all at once. I don't think about her often. When I do, it's usually the image of her in that sample wedding gown, asking me to look at what I'd be taking away from her, in a kitchen where my son's memory was being weighed on a scale against a caterer's invoice. Mrs. Chin still lives next door. She's the one person from that entire period of my life I see every week without fail. Last month, she gave David a shoebox, an old habit, apparently, that started with the dinosaurs and never really stopped. This one full of seed packets for a garden she thought I might want to start. I planted them in April. I don't know yet if any of it will grow. I go out and check most mornings anyway. The trust still sits exactly where my grandmother put it, administered exactly the way she intended, for exactly no one but the boy she built it for. It will likely never be touched now, and some days that feels like the saddest fact in this entire story. A fund with no beneficiary left to benefit from it, growing quietly in an account, doing nothing but existing, the way grief itself does. But I think if Lucas could understand any of this the way an 8-year-old understands fairness, cleanly, without the excuses adults build around themselves, he would understand that the money was never really the point. The point was that someone finally put his name back where it belonged, first before anything else. Said out loud in a kitchen that had tried very hard to skip past him entirely. Milton sits on a shelf in what used to be Lucas's room. Still on protecting the vein duty, I suppose, even with no vein left to protect. Some jobs don't end just because the reason for them does. I understand that better than I used to.